were out there supposedly working, it was Jacob that sent Joseph unto his brothers and said, go see how they're doing. Then bring me word of how they fare. When they saw Joseph coming, they said, behold, here cometh the dreamer. They decided that they were going to destroy the dreamer and to see what would become of the dream. Joseph had had a dream that he had a stalk of wheat himself, that all of his brother's stalks had rounded about him and bowed down in obeisance to him. Then there was a dream that Joseph had that the sun, the moon, and the stars had bowed down unto him. The sun, his father, the moon, his mother, and the stars, his brethren. And Joseph, given a dream by God, was just depicting what God had planned for their life. But they was full of so much envy and hatred that they decided that we're going to kill the dreamer. Then we shall see what will become of his dreams. They took him and threw him in a pit. So the brothers had pleaded with the rest of the brothers, we ought to not kill him, for after all, he is our brother. Let's just throw him in this pit and sell him off. Let's make some money off of him. And so they sold him unto the Ishmaelites, but they had took that coat of many colors and shredded it up and dipped it in an animal's blood and brought it back to daddy and asked him, is this your son's coat? Jacob's heart melted within him, thinking that he had already lost Joseph's mother. As she was giving birth to Benjamin, she died giving birth. The love of his life was gone. And the only one who was close to him, which was Joseph, which was the firstborn son of the love of his life, was gone as well. Jacob's heart melted within him. Then years later, only God can bring back what you thought you lost. Only God has the ability to restore that you thought has been taken away from you. And as God has brought Joseph back to Jacob, not only by himself, but Joseph comes back with two grand boys, two boys that can carry on the lineage of the family. Two boys who can carry on the tradition of their forefathers. Jacob here blesses them, and then out of adoration and gratitude for God, God had not just brought back Joseph, but God brought him Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh. It was a rejoicing occasion. Therefore, the Bible shows us that Jacob worshiped leaning upon his staff. Jacob realized that what God had granted him was more than he could ask for. It was a time for worship. It was a time to give God honor and praise. Here he was about to take his last breath. Here he was about to exit and depart this life himself. But God had blessed him to not only see the boy he thought he had lost, but God had blessed him to have the grandsons he never knew would have come. It was a time to worship God. And I think this afternoon we ought to learn from Jacob's experience. When God brings back something that you thought you lost, it's time to worship him. If you've ever been down on your sick bed and God has blessed you to start back breathing on your own, it's time to worship him. If God has ever allowed you to get into an accident and he brought you through with your bones still intact, that's a reason to worship God. If God has ever allowed you to get down to your last little bit and you don't know where the next is coming from, but some way, somehow, God makes a way out of nowhere. That's a time to worship God. When doors have been shut and God opens them up, that's a time to worship God. When windows have been closed and God raises them back up, that's a time to worship God. When your lights have been cut off and God blesses you to cut them back on, that's That's a reason to worship God. When the automobile has been repossessed, but God returns it back into your driveway, that's a reason to worship God. When your financial debts have been diminished, when your bodily health has been restored, when your sicknesses have been severed, when your cancer has been cured, when your ailments have been alienated, when your peace of mind has been pursued, when your problems have been solved, when your questions have been answered, when your races have been run, and when your victories have been victoriously obtained, that is a reason to worship God. For them, the Bible knew the validity of worshiping God. They knew that God was the creator of heaven and earth. They knew that God was somebody who could do for them what they could not do for themselves. And so when they came into the presence of God, it wasn't a matter of formality. When they bowed down before God, it was an act of adoration unto Him. It was their way of saying thank you for being so good to me. It was their way of saying thank you for bringing me through what you brought me through. I may have thought that this was going to take me out, but because you're God, I'm still here. And because I'm still here, that's a reason to worship God. Even when we look at the Old Testament heroes of faith, we see that they called God by many things. They related various circumstances that occurred in their life, and they categorized God with what He was to them at that time. See, He was Abel's sacrifice. He was Noah's rainbow. He was Abraham's ram, and he was Jacob's ladder. He was Issachar's burden. He was Jacob's scepter. He was Balaam's shadow and Moses' rod. He was Joshua's sun and moon that stood still. He was Isaiah's fig poultice. He was Hezekiah's sundial. He was Daniel's visions and Amos's burden. He was Malachi's son of righteousness. By the time you get to the New Testament, he's Peter's shadow. He's Stephen's sign and wonders. He's Paul's handkerchiefs and aprons. To us, he's a father if you're an orphan. To us, he's a husband unto a widow. He to the traveler at night. He's the bright and the morning star. To those who walk in the lonesome valley, he's the lily of the valley and a sweet rose of Sharon. When you're thirsty, he's the well that you can drink from, and never will it run dry. When you're hungry, he's bread in your cabinet. When you need somebody to stand beside you, he said, I'll never leave you, nor will I forsake you, so that you may boldly say that the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. When you're in the courtroom, he is a lawyer. When I'm down on my sick bed, he is a doctor. When I need to be taught, he's my great educator. When I need some love, he's my lover. When I need some consoling, he's my comforter. He's everything that I need him to be and more. Sometimes I say that he's like Scotch tape. You can't see him, but you know that he's there. Sometimes it's just like bounty. He's a quicker pick-up. Sometimes it's just like romance. He's how I spell relief. Sometimes it's just like Pepsi. You ought to have it in you, cause you know you got the right one, baby. Sometimes it's just like Coca-Cola. He's a real thing. Sometimes it's like State Farm. Just like a good neighbor, he's always there. Sometimes it's just like Prudential. He's a piece of the rock that I can depend on. Sometimes it's just like Campbell's soup. He's